Thank you, Rob, and welcome everyone to the new year of 2023 and to this open table where we gather with respect for each other to act to end homelessness and to advocate for policies to ensure safe and secure housing for all. We gratefully acknowledge that we meet on the traditional lands of the Puyallup people who have lived in this area since the beginning of time and are still here today. We acknowledge the effects of historical trauma and continuing discrimination and call ourselves to act in support of their tribal rights. So it's a new year with the calls to reflection and resolution that these yearly turnings bring. And today is January 6th, a traditional religious holiday within the Christian tradition called Epiphany, where three wise men, some say kings, brought gifts to an unsheltered family in Palestine, honoring the presence of the divine lying in an animal food trough. January 6th is also the second anniversary of an insurrection at the US Capitol. Its origin and effects continue to challenge our country's ability to do the daily work of democracy. And January 6th is a day to remember our colleague Maureen Howard, who died yesterday and who was a tireless advocate for the most vulnerable among us. We'll have time in the meeting today to share some thoughts about Maureen, but right now, I want to take a minute to connect these disparate ideas: open tables, land acknowledgements, epiphanies, insurrections, and departures. The word that keeps coming to me, sneaking in as the honest question when I try to write, is ACT, A-C-T. Make it happen, do something. And I think about what gets in the way: feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, despair, Eeyore-inspired commentary, hand-wringing, fear of refusal, embarrassment, being tired, having other priorities, and can't do one more thing. So I move on to think, how do we ensure that our table is open? Who is missing? And how do we open the table beyond an invitation to our space? What is a land acknowledgement without action in support of Indigenous rights, seeking redress for violence or return of stolen lands? What's a celebration of Epiphany without a commitment to bring necessities to people who are unsheltered and acting in support of the right to shelter? After all, there was a connection there about honoring the divine. And how do we act to make democracy work every day, whether responding to an insurrection, attending council meetings to testify, or challenging governmental policies that don't work? Maureen always left me with that insistent and persistent call to act. Whatever the challenge, there was something we could do. Her mind swirled with a myriad of options, and though she spoke with assurance about the best option and what it would be, she didn't seem overly daunted by the challenge of continuing the conversation in a way that would bring resolution closer. And she didn't shy away from insisting that others could, should, must act as well. Today, I'm feeling the power and the challenge of Maureen's action philosophy. She would say we can end homelessness and in the meantime, mitigate its devastating effects with enough persistence, not cutting off those with different views, and continuing to act when we don't think there's much energy left. And with what may seem a contradictory thought, she would also say we should take care of ourselves, resting when needed, and insist that those who staff services for people in need be fairly compensated for their work. So to honor Maureen's presence among us and to begin the work of this new year, the centering word today is ACT, and is right there in our mission: to connect and mobilize people to take action to end homelessness. So welcome to this continuing work. Thank you all for being here. Some of you may be new, and we traditionally use this time to have people just introduce themselves with their name and if they're associated with any group. But before we do that, for those new folks and any others who might forget our norms, just want to request that we all keep ourselves muted when we're not talking, that we also take off our video if we're doing things that might be distracting, that we use the Zoom's raise hand feature when we'd like to be recognized to speak, and that we use the chat. This is more an invitation than a requirement, but that we use the chat as a continuing conversation during the meeting. We do save these, and you can save them yourself, but this is a record of ideas that people have, of contact information they may have. And just as a reminder, it does go pretty fast sometimes, and if you're wanting to get a comment from somebody in the group, you might need to say it a second time because they might have lost the thread by the time you got to it. So those are the main ideas. And then our community norms are basic norms for respect and focus on some of the issues I addressed in the brief remarks. So Rob usually puts those in the chat. I haven't looked to see if it's there, but hopefully it will be. And if it's new to you, take a look at it and use it as a basis for your thinking. So welcome everyone. And if you are new or returning from some time away, I would like to just say your name and what group you're associated with. This is a time to raise your hand and be recognized. Norman.
Hi, everyone. I apologize. Hello, my camera's not working. I am literally 5 days on the job. I started with the city of Fife. I am the community navigator program manager. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Appreciate it, everyone. So happy to be back to the coalition. Tim Anderson ran the program previously. He's still with the city of Fife, providing valuable knowledge, but new with the jobs program manager. And what we do here in the city of Fife, we have a tiny home shelter. We get people working in our parks and recreation, build those valuable skills and behaviors necessary, addressing some of the barriers, and then get them into housing. So our program is about a 12-month program, but it's customized individually because everyone's success is different. So I'm just so happy to be here. And again, I'm so sad about Maureen. She was a warrior. And at the happy hour last night, it was really, really touching. But thank you. I'm glad to be back, everyone.
Thank you, Norman, for being here. Welcome, and we look forward to working with you. And Annika?
Yes, hello, everyone. My name is Annika Fraga. I am with Associated Ministries. I'm their community outreach specialist, and I am new to the position. I'm only 6 days in, but I definitely enjoyed meeting some of you at the Seven Seas Happy Hour yesterday, and also hearing about Maureen and her story and the work she's done was very, very inspiring. So yes, happy to be here. Good to meet all of you, and I plan on making this a regular thing, coming to the Zoom meetings and getting together with you all. So
welcome, Annika. Look forward to working with you as well. Right. I don't see others. Do you see anyone else, Rob?
I don't at this time, but I do urge folks, if you joined late or you don't want to speak up on camera, you can go ahead and put your information to introduce yourself in the chat. As Rosemary said, we use the chat as a resource, an ongoing resource. We post to our website and use to help find resources for folks in the community. So please use the chat as we go along. And thank you, Rosemary, very much for your words this morning. It's, I know for a bunch of us, it's kind of a somber morning. I'm really sad that I missed joining you all at Seven Seas yesterday. It sounds like you had a great remembrance of Maureen there. So let's move on with our first item in the agenda. We will, as Rosemary mentioned, have some time to talk about Maureen and her impact here later in the agenda. But let's start with this week on the streets. So this is a segment in every week's meeting where we ask folks who are doing direct outreach or who are observing homelessness in their own neighborhoods to share what they're seeing about the shifting needs on the streets and try to connect resources to folks as best as we can amidst the chaos that's continuing on the streets here in especially the city of Tacoma, where the rolling sweeps have been accelerating throughout the Christmas period and into the new year. Within the camping ban zones, the buffer zones that have been set up around 10 temporary shelters in the city of Tacoma. So if you have something to share about what you're seeing on the streets, just raise your hand, either your physical hand or use the raise hand function, and we'll get started there. So I open the floor to everyone else. And Anika, I think you have your hand is still up. Is that from just your introduction, or did you want to talk about what you're seeing on the streets?
No, actually, I was just going to put my hand down.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Rob. The last 2 weeks in the Gig Harbor Key Peninsula communities, we have seen a substantial increase in at least people asking for help. 4 already this week. 2 are single mothers with younger children living in their vehicles, 2 additional men living in vehicles. And in the last, the week prior to that, it was 3 new homeless folks asking for supplies and resources. This is by far the largest single increase we've seen in any 1 or 2 week period. Good news, 3 of our longer term folks are now being housed. Great success. Thank you, Greater Lakes and TRM. I think the program's finally sort of gelling and there's great communication going on between everybody. So, and just a quick note is that 3.5 years ago, I believe it was, that we started this little offshoot coalition over here. And without Maureen, we would not exist. Certainly Garrett was instrumental as well, but Maureen was our advocate. She would call me twice a week, whether I needed it or not, and I usually did. And we'll have missed that and we'll continue to miss that relationship. So thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Bob. Jeffrey.
Good morning, everyone. Here in Tacoma, I have stopped in on a couple of different camps. One particular that got swept was down on Center Street under the Thompson Street Bridge. Where they went, I don't know. One camper, the last one there, moved up onto the grassy knoll up over there. And so far, they're leaving him alone. One of the things that he and another person who had just left, they were concerned with what the city is claiming to be a 10-block radius and felt that they were outside the zone, and yet they got swept. So I think we need some better definitions from the city as to where those buffers actually are. I think the campers have a right to know that. So that's what I have to say for this morning. And it is a very somber day for me too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Other observations about what folks are seeing on the streets this week? Yeah, Richard.
Oh, heck. Like I say, it's just Groundhog Day again. Sweep under the 25th Bridge down off Puyallup Avenue, fairly ensconced encampment there, following up on a removal at East M and 25th. So that whole area has been swept. Kind of suspecting and hearing word that there may be continued removal of tents near the stability site in the coming week, and that won't be a surprise at all. The mystery continues to be where people go, and what I don't understand is how a point in time count is going to work when so many encampments have been disrupted in the last 12 months and people are finding encampments that are a little more hidden, a little more removed. Let's see, there's also clearance at 11th and Cushman. One good piece of news, it appears that Rhonda has gotten into a tiny home, although I'm not sure which tiny home village she's in. Some confusion out there for me. One man is unable to, he's not going to get housing because he's a sex offender. Where do sex offenders go? I'm not sure how that's supposed to work. I think we're going out to an encampment that's growing behind the Alfa Romeo dealership on South Tacoma Way along the railroad tracks. And we're going to go out there this afternoon. And then we'll be visiting, I believe with Teresa and I will be out at the Union Street Loop later this afternoon with some food. The city contractors have been doing a fairly good job of picking up garbage, distributing purple bags, and all in all, the encampment is the campers are putting in effort to try and keep that clean. While there's no guarantees, it certainly seems that the cleaner and safer an encampment remains, the less vulnerable they are to any sudden and surprising sweeps that could go on. Let's see, I'm sure there's others. I posted one in the chat. Sweep at 66 in South Tacoma Mall Boulevard of the vehicular encampment. That is gone now. And I'm sure there's others that are not coming to mind, but it just continues out there. And for many, there's no place to go. So that's what I know.
Thank you for the update, Richard, and for the observations. Hopefully, I know Jeff Rogers is on the call. I'm sure he'll be talking about the point in time count when we get to that update, and hopefully can offer some thoughts about how to effectively try to count folks amidst the chaos of the sweeps. Anyone else with updates from the streets? Yeah, Teresa.
This is less of an update and more of a question. As campers are beginning to camp further and further away from the roads so that they're harder to sweep, which is a natural consequence of the increased sweeps. I don't know how people are dealing with this who are doing outreach. I know it's posing some problems as we go out trying to find ways to help. So I just want to put it out there in the air. I'm not expecting people to answer right now, but maybe we could have a conversation about this at some point. How are we going to change the way we're doing things to deal with the consequences of this really stupid policy?
Yeah, great question that we should consider, Teresa. And Ed.
Good morning. I was at the sweep yesterday on 25th, and there were, by my count, 10 officers at that sweep. Now, from what I know of our hardworking police department, there are approximately 36 to 40 officers that they can get on the street at any one time to cover the city of Tacoma. Numbers may be off, but they're in that area because our police officers, a lot of them are leaving and having a hard time getting more. But to my recollection, that means a third of the police officers or somewhere around there were watching the demolition of people's homes down on 25th. I didn't, as I went through there, I just realized how many officers were standing there watching this. Maybe they were needed. I didn't see any violence. I didn't see any resistance. There was one man that was kind of protesting that this was all of his stuff that he owns in the world, and it was going to be thrown out. But it seemed wrong. You know, maybe a few officers or something, or but I thought 10 was a bit overkill. One of the people in that encampment I talked to, I had asked him how he got to be homeless. And he said, well, part of it was 2 years ago, he was an employee of the city of Olympia. And he was in a car accident, was injured and couldn't work anymore. And within a year, he had lost his house. And now he's living on the street, living rough on the street. And that brought to mind the anecdotes that we need. Hopefully next week, we will be having a breakout session where we share the stories from the street. And I challenge every one of you to go talk to somebody that's on the street. Find out their story and bring it to our breakout sessions next week and share their story with us so that we can capture those and we can understand a little bit about what they're up against. It's hard to do until you get a view of the enormity of the situation. So I will shut up and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed, and I would never ask you to shut up. But I do want to thank you for planting the seed for sharing folks who are willing to share their stories about how they became homeless during a breakout next week. So thank you for that. And Jay, why don't you close us out on this section of the meeting? What do you have to say this week?
Something to really consider as people that are doing the outreach and as the people that are entering the one-on-one basis with some of these physicians. The further they are pushed out of town, the further that we are pushed out of environments that are supposed to be safe, the harder time we have with working with others and allowing people to come near us. So the further away from the street they get, the further away from dealing with humanity, wanting to talk to you, wanting to work with you they get. The best thing that we can do with every interaction is remind them that they are real people and we see them as such and we care about them, because ultimately that is what will help them seek help. Without compassion, without care, without looking at these people and saying, hey, you're a real person and I value you, we're not really going to get very far. And so every time that we're out there, it needs to be more than just what do you need? It also needs to be, I see you and you are relevant and you do matter and I'm fighting for you. Because otherwise people are going to just run from you. And it's going to get worse the further this ban goes.
Thank you, Jay. So before we move completely away from the on the streets section of today's meeting, I did want to remind folks that you can use the chat to drop items in there that you either need or have to share for doing outreach. So whether it's things like hand warmers that you might have or that you need to have, in the case that we have inclement weather come up again, please use the chat to share that. We can put it into our spreadsheet. And Jay, I don't know if you have the link handy, but it'd be great to drop the link to the Google sheet that you created, where we've been tracking kind of need and share items. So yeah, Tammy, you have your hand up.
I do have my hand up. I just want to remind the outreach workers that if they come across any veterans, let us know, because right now we have one opening. So, remember that the Veterans Village is there for the homeless veterans. It's just a reminder to outreach workers that they can send them our way.
Thank you, Tammy. And Patricia?
First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here just to support, and and try to find a solution for homelessness. Second, kind of what Jay said, is that like some people are just one step away, one paycheck away from being homeless. We did not expect COVID. We do not expect the car accident. We do not expect the health changes that we have. Coming off of like Maureen, I'm pretty upset about that, but just to understand that we're all humans, and some of us are one step away from the street with a paycheck. And thank you for everybody doing the work that they do. All right.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. All right, so let's move on to a quick community spotlight. And Aaliyah, do you want to share about the Cricket Free Phones program? Maybe she stepped away. All right, so since we're not hearing anything there, let's go ahead and move on to our next item in the agenda. And that was that we wanted to carve out some time for folks to share a little bit of remembrances and talk about the impact that Maureen has had. And I know some folks were able to do this in person yesterday during the social at 7Cs. Not everybody was able to be there. But I thought it would be important to carve out some time this morning just to share some Maureen stories to inspire us as we get into the rest of 2023. And so I opened the floor if anyone would like to share. Yeah, Sally, why don't you get us started?
So it was a great joy to me to reconnect with Maureen around this work. I had worked with her years and years and years ago in the Hilltop King Center, and some of the work she did then, and with the affordable housing efforts that happened throughout the years. And then we kind of lost track of each other. And so reconnecting here was a joy. And I was reminded of her energy and her passion and her absolute consistent persistence, and what a role model she is for what we need to do to prevail with what we're trying to accomplish. And so I'm heartbroken that she's no longer in the world. That Maureen was unique. There is no replacement. And I honor her for the work she did right up until she couldn't do it anymore. And I just will miss her every day.
Thank you, Sally. And Jan.
Yes, and Kenny was one of, I think there was about 20 of us that came to 7Cs last night, and it was really important to gather. When there is loss, we need each other. We need the fellowship of breaking bread or tipping a glass in honor and memory of those who have gone before. And the story that I told last night was in the process of getting to know Maureen, especially at the end, she had time to tell stories of her past. And not only were there incredible things that she did in the city of Tacoma for those of us who live in Tacoma and for all of our neighbors, and that went back decades. She worked for the State Department for a time in the early 90s, late 80s. She worked for the State Department in South Africa, the country of South Africa, at the time of horrific high incidents and high rates of HIV/AIDS. The drug had been approved for use to combat and slow down the disease of AIDS. The government of South Africa did not have enough money or enough medicine to give everybody who could benefit from the drug. So the government of South Africa decided that no pregnant woman would get the drug. And Maureen got a hold of Dr. Anthony Fauci, who agreed to do a telephone conference between Washington, D.C. and South Africa. And with that one conference, was able to change the policy of the government of South Africa and hence save who knows how many lives from the ravages of AIDS. So that kind of a story makes those of us, I remember meeting at Salvation Army when before COVID, we were meeting daily at Salvation Army, and Maureen always had the policy section of our Friday Coalition. And for a lot of folks, myself included, policy is sort of an eye-glazing segment, right? I mean, policy. Ugh. She made it come alive, and then her actions and her competence made it real and significant for the betterment of everybody. So will the circle be unbroken? Here's to you, Maureen.
Thank you for sharing that, Jan. That's a great story. Teresa?
So there's that old saying about well-behaved women not making history, and I would just go on record as saying Maureen was anything but well-behaved, and that is a powerful thing she brought to us. Some of you knew her back when the Last Chance Shelter was a tiny little thing, when Nativity House was a little door-front thing, when there was, when she was working on getting employment for people who were unhoused, sweeping up city areas. She did a lot of things like that. She also stepped on tons of toes. She had people who would get really riled at her because she was such a straight shooter, and if she had an idea, she was going to go forward with it. So I think the part about Maureen's life that inspires me is that sometimes we work really hard to be likable and to take care of everyone else. And those are really good aspirations. But it's also important to know when we need to be sort of kick-ass, in-your-face people. And I think that's the part that that I will take away. I also want to leave you with a few thoughts from Beth, Maureen's daughter, who said, first of all, she talked about how much this work, this coalition meant to her mom. And she said that Maureen died kind of on her own terms. She went home the day before yesterday. She didn't want to die in the hospital. They took her home the day before yesterday. She knew that if she didn't have the hospice paperwork done, it would create a lot of complications for her family. I don't know how many of you have been through that process, but it's a deal. You want to have your hospice paperwork taken care of. So yesterday, the hospice folks came, did the intake, took care of the paperwork. And when they left, Maureen died. So it was like, check, I'm out of the hospital. Check, I'm not alone. My daughter's with me. Check, I've got the hospice stuff taken care of. And so it just struck me how she kind of did things her way, right? And so thank you all for the part that you played in bringing this. I would say, I'm not thanking you for myself, I'm thanking you on behalf of the effect that Maureen has had in our community since coming back to this. You were a welcoming place for her to land and to start back into advocacy after years of being away. So let's keep it up.
Thank you, Teresa. And anyone else who would like to share a little bit about Maureen, another story?
I just want to say that I'm really sad today to hear about Maureen. She was such a powerful force. I learned so much from her, and she was such a bulldog when it came to getting things done. And she was not afraid to confront anybody on behalf of vulnerable people. She didn't care if you were the mayor, the governor, you were just like the rest of us. And she would go after you. She really supported me. I've had a lot of losses in my life the last couple of years. And when we met at Salvation Army, she'd pull me aside and put her arm around me. She had such a tender side to her and such a strength. And I will miss her deeply, but she will always be an inspiration for me. And when I think about kicking ass and taking names, her face is going to be right there in front of me, leading me on. So I just want to say she was awesome. There is no replacement for her. And I also admired the love she had for her husband and her family. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Cece. Yeah, she's going to be missed by many of us. And I think one of the greatest things we can do is continue the work and step up and start kicking ass and taking names ourselves on Maureen's behalf, since she can't do this any longer. So any last words before we move on to our next item on the agenda? We obviously are not going to move on from the loss of Maureen that quickly, but I do know we have other things on our agenda today, and she would want our work to continue. But anyone want to share some final words?
Hey Rob, real quick, this is Colin DeForest. I really
Great to see you,
don't feel
Colin.
I haven't been on this meeting in a while, so I really don't feel like I have the time, or I probably shouldn't say much because I really don't have deserve the time. But I think Cece said it great. I found out about Maureen and I wanted to hop on. It's a terrible loss, but I would just say that yeah, she did great stuff, you know, and she was just a force. And being on the government side of things and dealing with Maureen, she made everyone shake, right? Because she knew you were going to get it directly and she was going to give it to you. And also you knew that she was going to do it in a way where it was respectful and you could negotiate your way through it. So just an avid advocate, you know, I mean, just shoes will not be filled by one person. So anyways, she will be missed. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Colin. And I presume that was why you had joined us today. It's great to see you on the call again. All right. So please do continue to share remembrances in the chat. It would be a really nice memento to keep those stories. So let's move to our next item on the agenda. And Zev, I know you wanted to talk to us about the Home in Tacoma for All Tenant Rights Action Conference coming up, and activities tied in. And this is perfectly fitting with the kind of advocacy that Maureen has done for so many years. So I hand the floor to you. Do you need the ability to share your screen at all, or do you just want to talk to us?
I can just talk to you, and I think that's absolutely right, Rob. I did also send out an email yesterday, so people can check for that if they want to read the full endorsement letter for the action conference. But basically, I have something very exciting to bring to conversation today. Home in Tacoma for All, which is an organization I represent, will be deciding to move forward with a Tenants Bill of Rights ballot initiative in the next year. This represents one of the greatest advancements in tenants' rights that we have seen in a long time in the city. And I just want to start by reading out some of the protections that we're currently considering. So first, economic eviction protections. If a landlord raises rent over 10%, forcing tenants to leave, they must pay tenant relocation assistance equal to 3 months rent. Second, require 6 months notice for all rent increases, allow tenants to break leases without penalty within that period if they need other housing. 3, ban rent increases where there are outstanding code evictions, ban evictions of children during the school year, and ban evictions during cold weather months when survival is challenging. And cap move-in costs to no more than first and last month's rent, cap late fees and pet deposits, ban or cap rental application fees. So I'm here today to ask for the coalition and coalition's members' endorsement of our action conference. So not the initiative itself, but the conference where we'll be bringing the community supporters together to both discuss the campaign and what commitments we want to make, and also just vote on whether or not we want to move forward with the initiative itself. Of course, we do plan to vote yes on moving forward with this, as we are very prepared to win this initiative. There's currently a number of organizations in the community who have already endorsed this. Some of you are on this call today. Thank you for your support. And there's also, we've laid a lot of the groundwork to move forward with this. We've, been working over the past around 6 months on setting up a lot of the infrastructure to successfully run a campaign like this, like data management and outreach and getting the right people involved. So we have a lot of those things figured out now, and we're ready to move forward, in addition to around $35,000 in fundraising that we've done to make this campaign a success. Of course, that's only about a third of what we're gonna need to be successful on this campaign. And we also have people working on writing up the initiative itself. So the final language isn't final, but we have Noel Lowney, who's specializes in ballot initiatives and has guided other campaigns to success, one of the top lawyers in the state on this kind of thing, and Ed Witter, who's with the Housing Justice Project and has been doing a lot to advise us along in this process and make sure that this campaign is a success. Some of the language we're actually considering on making some changes, especially to that first portion of economic protections. We're actually thinking of making parts of this initiative a little more aggressive in terms of, in that respect, scaling the moving assistance that required with the rent increase. So we expect to have final language for the initiative that we'll be voting on within about a week from today. And I'll make sure all of you have access to that. We think this is the right time to push a campaign like this in Tacoma. As many of you know, there is a big connection between rent burden and rents going up and the homelessness population expanding. There's been actually some really interesting research connected specifically between like percentage increases and rent burden and homelessness. And I'll share that Pierce County is the second most rent and burdened county in the state of Washington. We've also found that in our research throughout the country, high rent burden has directly connected to success of similar tenants' rights initiatives. So we're actually really confident that this is a very good time to run an initiative like this in Tacoma, with rent burden reaching up to 50% of the renting population in Tacoma, and rents just in the last year or two here in Pierce County going up around 22%. So this is really the right time to step in and make sure that we're putting some, slowdowns on the rate of rents going up, and that we can stem the flow of our, working class community members into homelessness. So with that, I'd just like to open up the floor to any questions people might have. And, I hope this is something you'll all support. Thank you.
Thank you, Zev. And let's open the floor for any questions folks might have about either the conference or the early thoughts on the initiative. Yeah, Dana.
Yeah, is this just for the city of Tacoma or would this be for all of Pierce County?
Thank you. Yes, it's just for Tacoma at this time. So we intend to move on to projects that will affect all of Pierce County at some point. This is kind of where we're at in terms of running a citywide initiative in terms of capacity. In the first 4 months, the next 4 months, we intend to have a ground game to collect around 8,000 signatures to get the initiative on the November ballot. And we also plan to have a very serious get out the vote operation going into late this year.
Thank you, Zev. And any other questions? Yeah, Courtney.
If we endorse this as a coalition, will the coalition have spots at the table as this conversation goes further?
Absolutely. So we're having the action conference on February 4th, which is included in the email I sent out, and people can review that and other information there. We're also planning a action conference. The planning meeting for the action conference is on the 17th of this month. So if people from the coalition are interested in being more like deeply engaged with the team putting this all together, please reach out to me or send me an email. I'll put it in the chat right after I'm done here, and we'll make sure that you get the information for that meeting. And we're actually very happy to expand the coalition of folks that are working on pushing this thing forward.
Thank you for that question, Courtney. And your hand went up again?
A follow-up question. Would you want to encourage us each to go and get endorsements for this from our own organizations, since we are in other orgs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, any organizations that are represented here today who are interested in endorsing are more than encouraged to endorse if they're able to do that, or any other organizations that people here are connected to. I know there's a lot of people here won't be able to publicly endorse this due to various restrictions around, 501c3s. It's a little murky because technically we're only asking people to endorse the action conference where we'll be voting on whether or not to move forward with the initiative and not the initiative itself. So, that's for people to figure out for themselves of what's appropriate for their organizations. But whether it's an official endorsement or, tacit support and people getting involved, we welcome all different kinds of support.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Zev, and also Timothy for your comment in the chat. All right, any final questions for Zev? All right. Well, I appreciate you bringing this to us, and we will discuss among ourselves. Encourage folks to attend the conference, and I think this is an exciting development for folks in Tacoma. So thank you. All right, so we haven't had a breakout question for like 3 weeks. We haven't had a regular meeting for 3 weeks. So I believe when we last had our last regular meeting, December 16th, we didn't have time for a breakout question, as I recall, so we don't have another summary for Timothy to give us, but we should talk now. So what I thought would be a good way to start this year is to think about what are some hard, solid goals that the coalition should set to accomplish in 2023. We've got a brand new year ahead of us, and I think there are many of us who are tired of talking and want to see action. And so we thought it would be important to spend a few moments in small breakout groups and talk about what we think those actions should be for 2023. So before I go into the instructions for breakouts, I see Courtney has her hand up. What did you have to add, Courtney?
Yeah, sorry. Zev was asking for us to endorse. So I feel like one, we need to move, and like, is there anybody who would move such an endorsement? Is there a second? And discussion and vote, since the ask was for an endorsement of the meeting.
So I was not prepared to do a vote today, but I did want to give the opportunity for outlining the proposal, and I thought that we could come back next week and actually take a vote. So that's why I was hoping we'd have the opportunity for the presentation. I appreciated that Zev sent the material to the group through the email list, and then we can take a vote next week after folks have had an opportunity to okay, thank you, Zev. Yeah, so appreciate that call for clarification, Courtney. All right, so those of you who have been with us before know how these breakouts work. We will spend the next 15 minutes talking in small breakout groups of 5 or 6 folks. What I would urge you is, if when you get to your breakout room, if you could appoint someone to be the note taker for the room and paste your notes into the chat when we return. The more complete your notes are, the better summary that Timothy's going to be able to pull together so that we can talk about what we all said next week. So again, our question is, what are the concrete things that we should try to accomplish as a coalition this year, and what actions should we be focused on? So I'll send us all away, and we'll be back here at about 10:07. All right, welcome back, everyone. And I think this is one of my favorite parts of every meeting, is when people come back from the breakout rooms and all of you all are on screen.
Yes.
So appreciate seeing all your faces. So the reminder is
yes,
that
I was gonna ask right after that one.
and
Things like a
just so you know, I'm
yes.
going to mute you. There we go. So a reminder, just please share your notes from your breakout room. I know 15 minutes flies by really quick, and I still hope it was a good conversation. But I'm looking forward to seeing what folks' ideas are for what we should really focus on this year. This will be the first of a number of conversations about where we should put our energy toward real action in 2023. So love seeing those notes flow into the chat, and let's move on to our regular government updates. And we'll get started first with the updates from the city of Tacoma.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, everyone. One of the major updates that I do have is our safe parking site, which we have sent out a flyer as of this morning of a community meeting. We are scheduled for the 18th of January. We're inviting the community at Holy Rosary to learn about a new safe parking site at that location, with Catholic Community Services as being the provider. I see Alan is with us today at this meeting, and is taking a major step in that direction of safe parking in the city of Tacoma, him and the Catholic Community Services and that team. And so we're super excited to partner with them with this site. I did see that I will send out that flyer mailer through the listserv so that you guys can all have those details, and hopefully you can join us. It will be an in-person meeting, and it will probably be a little bit different than our previous meetings when we're doing virtual, because it's more of a presentation than a question of answering. So it will look a little bit different in terms of a format, but we're hoping to engage the community in a way that allows them to be heard about some of their concerns, and how this will help with the homeless, addressing the seriousness of safe parking for folks, especially families and individuals, and have a hopefully some good positive outcomes from this community meeting. And then we're hoping to be in operation this month once we get past that community meeting. On other notes of safe parking, Jeffrey, I saw your message We are been working with PDS and their legal counsel to understand what safe parking looks like when it's not permitted as a temporary shelter. So we'll continue to keep working on that and making sure we have all the details, and we'll hopefully be able to share those with Jeffrey, who can talk about some of the things that we've worked on and agreed upon that would make it safe parking for churches in Tacoma. And that is the only update that I have currently right now.
Okay, thank you, Caleb. One question I did have for you since you're on the call is, have you had any success in getting the canopies at the 35th and Pacific site in place yet? Or is that still something that's a work in progress?
That is still a work in progress. I know Luis is off for a majority of this month and we weren't able to connect. I can reach out to Nate to see where they're at with that. As kind of a reminder, they were made to order and we're supposed to be in the process of getting there for 35th and Pacific. And so I can definitely follow up with you, Rob, and the coalition on what that timeline looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Because obviously winter's not waiting. So so a couple of hands are up if you could have a moment. Teresa, why don't we start with you?
So that's great news about the safe parking. Thank you for that. And also, I just have a question because the two new campsites, there are glitches with them that I think maybe could be helped by having more community involvement. That's just a thought. But also the fact that they aren't permanent campsites is troubling to me. They're so expensive to set up, and it seems like a really poor use of our resources to keep setting up new campsites when we have some that run really, really well. And if you could look at making, for instance, Forward Operating Base into a permanent campsite. It's got a great location. They're doing a wonderful job. And it seems if you made it a permanent location, you could bring in the adequate electricity to do the things they need to do. They can't even wash their dishes in hot water. And there's just some safety things that could be really improved by having more electricity. So I want to pitch that out there, that I think when you see something that's working, don't fix it, just make it better by adding the resources that are needed. Just a thought.
Thank you, Teresa. I don't know if you wanted to address that at all, Caleb. Well, the city does not have a permanent shelter that we fully support. We usually partner with other organizations that already have existing property. The reason why Fob Hope is specifically temporary is because TPU owns that property, and that would have to go through a board situation to acquire that. And then there's a lot of other things too. Once we get into permanent sheltering, then we get into different types of permitting and requirements. One of the things that's nice about the emergency declaration is it gives us a lot more flexibility to set up emergency shelters while we're hopefully building more permanent housing. And majority of the sites that we do have shelter on are actually slated to become affordable housing. And so often we're just borrowing that land for the time being while we're sheltering folks as an emergency situation in hopes that we get to more long-term housing affordability because of just the property that we have available for us, and that is actually usable. So it is one of the biggest challenges. I think the one that is probably our best bet is probably the stability site, just by where it's at and what the stability site holds in terms of the city's property. But all the other property is pretty much spoken for affordable housing, or is not under the general government.
So it sounds like we could petition TPU to pass the land over for this use, maybe. But the other issue is, I don't think anyone in this call believes that we are not going to need campsites as part of the solution to homelessness for the foreseeable future. So if the imaginary idea is that we can turn every campsite into affordable housing and people are just going to not need tent spaces anymore, I think that's not logical. We are going to need tent spaces. So let's make some really good tent spaces and let's make them permanent, like KOA campgrounds, so that we have them as resources, and then keep building the affordable housing. Yes, but the people who are in tents keep getting shifted around, and we spend a lot of money setting up new campsites. It's just not a logical approach. So someplace that's permanent, that has tents, in addition to the stability site, which is not adequate, is not enough.
Thanks, Teresa. Dr. Jarvie.
Hey, this is a question for Caleb. So I read that city of Seattle has made some space for RVs, and we were talking about that earlier in the meeting about how people get RVs and they realize, and then they find out that there's no parking for an RV older than 2013, and so all these RVs just end up on the street. But that would be a solution if we could get a safe place for RV parking. And so I was just wondering if City of Tacoma has any thoughts in that direction.
Yeah, so with this safe parking site at Holy Rosary, after 90 days, they're going to reevaluate whether they can take RVs on that site. So that will be part of the process too as well. It will be a small amount that they may be able to take on, but it will give us a little bit of insight at what it takes to maintain a safe parking site with RVs on there and all of those challenges. I think one of the hardest part is where to dump black and gray water, and majority of in the city, and even just on personal use, it's hard to find that. I know that there are services that will come and pick it up, but it's pretty costly in comparison. So we just have to be able to figure out some of those things as time goes on. But it is definitely a priority for us as a city to be able to help folks who are in RVs to find safe parking as well.
Thank you. And thank you for the question, Dr. Jarvie. Zoe.
Have to unmute myself. Quickly addressing what Teresa was talking about, my big concern with that plan is buildings don't pop up overnight, and when the construction starts on these, if that funding actually goes through, where are people going to go in the interim, and what supports are going to be in place to make sure that's actually going to people on the street at that 0 to 10, maybe 20% AMI. My other question for Caleb is specifically sweep related. Do we know when the sweep near the stability site is happening? It was the potential date was a couple weeks ago. So I would like to know when that's actually happening and what considerations are being made about whether or not it's a good time to do that. Not that it is ever a good time to sweep people.
So Zoe, for that removal, I'm not sure. I thought that was already it was already in process, has been posted. So I will follow up with you when I can touch base with the HEAL team on that.
Thank you, Caleb. All right, additional questions for Caleb, please go ahead and use the chat. Hopefully you're able to hang out, Caleb, and address questions that come up there. Let's move on to our next government update. And I saw Jeff Rogers was in the meeting earlier. Jeff, you still here and have an update from Pierce County Human Services?
I am here. Good morning. We're planning the homeless point in time count. Trainings start next week. We have training scheduled for the next 2 weeks, and 3 weeks from now, the pit count will take place. If you would like to volunteer, there's still opportunity. I can paste that website where you can register in the chat, and all volunteers must go through the training, even if you're a current 20 years serving in the community doing outreach. All volunteers that are doing pit count must go through our training for volunteers. So it's coming, it's soon, and we'd love to have you help us by volunteering.
Thanks, Jeff. In relation to the point in time count, there was some conversation earlier about how to handle the challenge of folks being so shuffled around inside the city of Tacoma. What is there, what planning is being done to ensure that there's the best possible count within the city, given the kind of chaos with the sweeps?
Well, we need for folks to tell us where folks are at that we're going to count. We'll be doing the count on Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, and then Friday morning. So it's a little longer, not just the overnight, but the afternoon of Thursday and Friday morning, to almost a 24-hour period to make sure that we get everybody. So I'm compiling, and I've been asking folks to provide me locations. I drive around this city a lot and I'm documenting locations. I'm like, oh, didn't see that over there. So I'm documenting them myself. They're encampments in places I'm like thinking, how do volunteers even get into that site? You know, with some of the sites that are kind of visible from the highway, but accessibility is another question. So please, 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 and I'm going to be reaching out to a few of you. My plan is to reach out to Jeffrey, Teresa, and Richard. The three of you, for sure, you're on my list starting next week, to help, if you could help identify locations that you're very familiar with, to make sure we're not missing locations. We're working with the outreach teams that are funded to do outreach, but any of you who do outreach and want to share with us those locations, we could add them to our list. So we know that what we put on the list next week may not be the same in 3 weeks, but if we have them on our list and we check to make sure we're not going to miss anybody, and even up to the date of the count, if you know of a location and you know people could contact me with that information, we'll make sure that we get a team out to any location that's identified. We don't know where all the locations are. People do move, we know. So if I didn't mention your name, I just know all the work that Teresa, Jeffrey, and Richard do. I know others of you do a lot of work, but please let me know locations so that we can document those and make sure we send people. And some people may go to a location that's empty. It may be something that's been swept or something that people have moved from, but we want to make sure that we're checking every location that's a known location by anybody for the potential of identifying someone to count.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the answer. And I will remind folks, if you do receive if you're on the mailing list for the coalition, Jeff's email address is in the agenda for every week's meeting. So that's a good way to reach out to Jeff. Courtney, I see your hand up. And you're muted right now, Courtney. You're still muted.
Are you talking to me? I cut out for a second.
Yeah, I saw your hand go up, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask your question.
As soon as I did it, my internet went. But
Yeah.
I was wanting to ask, when I signed up to do the pit, there were no overnight hours. Is there an overnight shift?
There is an overnight shift. Anyone that works within our homeless crisis response system that's knowledgeable about this crisis are allowed to work the evening. We don't offer it to citizens as a whole unless they tell us they want to do the night count. So as part of your training, we will be identifying folks who will be doing the overnight count. So yes, outreach workers, nonprofit organizations or organizations that do this kind of work, citizen volunteers like Jeffrey and Richard who do this kind of work. We're hoping that all of you will help us on the night count. But we're not promoting that to the community as a whole. It's just, it'll be something that'll be discussed with the most of you that we know who do this work on a regular basis about your options of when you want to do it. And hopefully you'll want to help on the night count.
Thank you, Jeff. And Jeffrey, and then Rosemary, and we'll move on to the next item. Go ahead, Jeff.
I want to support Jeff in this. I have done the point in time count 4 years, 5 years. And I'll be honest with you, it's sorely needed because funding affects by the count. And we all need the funding. So if you haven't volunteered for the point in time count, please do. Talk to people you know about the point in time count, especially neighbors who wouldn't normally go out there. Talk to them about the point in time count. Let's get out there. Let's get as many people out there as we can to count because the funding is affected by this count. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And Rosemary.
I was thinking of something a little bit related, and it's more that maybe next week, Jeffrey, when Jeff, when you come, I'd like to hear a little bit about what actually this data is used for in terms of funding, since it's seen as often inaccurate in comparison to other ways of measuring who's in the homeless system. And yet I know it's a required count that's governmentally required. I would like to know a bit, and for others who don't know this background too, how is this data used and what's the value of it seen in terms of the funding? So not anything long, but just to be clear about it, because it's not always clear to me. And the other thing I wanted just to mention is that while it's important to count as many people as possible, I'm really a little bit dubious that people who are trying to hide where they're at because they've been swept so much are going to come forward very easily. So it'll be inaccurate in ways that perhaps we would prefer be different. And the county, I hope, knows clearly that that's possible too. Thanks.
Yeah, we know it's not an exact count. I think anyone that works in this business that looks at the numbers that we provide realize it's an undercount. It's not anywhere near the number that we believe it is. When you ask the experts who do data, like Garrett Nyland, he comes up with a complete different number. If we were to look at our data that we collect annually through our homeless management information system, it tells us a complete different story. But I'll come next week prepared to provide a quick blurb about these counts that have been going on for about 25 years and when they started, in the relationship of these numbers compared to other data, since we've come a long way in the tech world with data. But I'll share that next week.
Thank you, Jeff. That'd be great. And Jay, why don't you help close us out on this update?
I think that it is important for people to understand that thousands of dollars have been lost in previous years because of lack of a correct count. Without numbers, we cannot get the funds through legislature. A lot of what we do in the background depends highly on how many people we serve and how we serve them. So without those pick counts, without the data that we've been pushing for with inclement weather, without input from our nonprofits on how they are assisting people in their output, we cannot get the proper funding to help more people and end this crisis. It is imperative that we get numbers, and it starts with going out there and counting people and keeping track of the services that we provide.
Thank you, Jay. All right, so let's shift over to our updates from the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. I see Jenny on screen. I saw Isaiah in the room as well. So go ahead, Jenny.
Hello, everyone. So glad to be here with you. Happy New Year. Was at 7 Seas last night and was really inspired. Sad about the passing of Maureen, and also inspired by all of you, and love to hear the story. So thank you for allowing me to be part of that. On the communicable disease front, we still have a lot of respiratory illness out there, but nationwide trends show that RSV, that virus I've been talking about, and influenza or flu are trending downwards. COVID, however, is showing upticks in parts of the country. So potentially, another little bump wave of COVID. But locally, our COVID hospitalizations are low and continue on a downward trend. CDC rates, our community level is low. Vaccines are our best defense against COVID, and saw some data today that in Pierce County, only 24% of those who are eligible for the new-ish bivalent booster have been boosted, have taken that booster. So really want to encourage folks to get boosted, encourage others to do so to stop community spread. I will share some resources so that you can be reminded if you're eligible, and you can share that with others. We still have vaccine clinics going for the foreseeable future. I'm not sure when those will go away, but they are happening still. I will share our link to our vaccine page where you can find clinics. I'm also going to work with our congregate sites to see if we can use, resources we still have to do some regular clinics, at least this quarter, to make sure we're trying to get folks in our unhoused community and our shelter community boosted. We still have isolation and quarantine support for those who have COVID and need a safe place to isolate. And we're continuing to support 2 adult family homes until further notice. Still have testing sites, and I'll share some resources for testing. If you go to our test page, you will find the actual physical test site information, but you can get test kits at the libraries, both Pierce County Library, Tacoma Public Library. You can email our testing team directly to get test kits for your organization. Washington is still doing the Say Yes to the Test to get free at-home tests by ordering those. If you're like me, you may have some tests at home that are expired. So this is a good time to order more for your family. Let's see what else. Monkeypox or Mpox cases have been stable. That did not blow up into a huge issue for our community, which we are grateful for. My dog is crying in the background. I'm so sorry. But I'll share information about an upcoming event that's happening at Urban Grace Church next week. Thelma, please. I'll also share some flu information. Our flu levels are high, but they are declining, as I said, just like they are nationwide. So that's great news. And that's what I have to share today. So I'm here for questions, or we can turn it over to Isaiah and he can share some information from environmental health.
Great. And I see Zoe has her hand up. Did you want to ask a question now, or is it for after Isaiah speaks?
I had a communicable disease question quickly that I was going to just email you about, but I figured somebody else might want to know the answer to.
Sure.
It seems like there's an RSV outbreak at the 35th camp. There are 7 people that are sick with RSV symptoms. And I just, as folks are out and about, if they run into a potential outbreak of something other than COVID, do we contact you and you get in touch with folks that go out there, or is there a contact person?
Absolutely. Yeah, you would let me know. And I can touch base with our epi folks. I can reach out to, I can try and get in touch with folks about some prevention, but certainly want to let folks know here. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat. Yeah, so let's connect, Z, but just for everyone, if you do, you want to basically, if you run into a situation like that, you want to try and encourage folks to seek care. And I know that's not always an easy sell for folks, but you can encourage as good a hygiene as possible, mask wearing, all the things that we think about with COVID, with flu, with cold, trying to prevent the spread of those things. And I realize when we're talking about encampments, that is really challenging, but yeah, reach out to me if you have questions about those things. But I think encouraging people to seek care and use preventive measures for stopping spread of things, if you're in the position to have those conversations with folks. And then I always want to know if there's a collection of cases somewhere, so we can track that.
Yeah, there are 7 people sick at that camp, and at least one of them has developed pneumonia.
Okay, yeah, I was not aware of that. I don't know if others here are aware of that. So let's talk more offline.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Jarvie.
I have a concern with people saying RSV. Is it flu or is it RSV? Because according to what I've read, RSV is affecting small children, immunocompromised, and elderly. And it seems like this is more of a flu outbreak. And so I just don't like to use that. I don't like to keep saying, hey, RSV is doing this, RSV is doing that. It's keeping people out of work and stuff like that. So can you just re-emphasize the what we're looking for when we say RSV or when we say flu?
Yes, I mean, it's tough, right? I think your point is well taken. I don't know, Z, again, we can talk more offline. I don't know how how we would be confirming that those folks have RSV, but Dr. Jarvie's absolutely right. It's very, very common in young folks and older folks. Certainly immunocompromised folks are at risk. So that could be, but there isn't a way to know if you have RSV or the flu without testing. So very similar symptoms. RSV has more cold-like symptoms. I can't speak to more like off the top of my head than that. But you don't know unless you test.
Yeah,
but
that's why I
similar
said
impacts.
symptoms.
Similar impacts and symptoms. So I think it is important to, I appreciate your reminder to be precise. I didn't know there was an outbreak or a number of cases there until Z just made me aware of that. So we don't actually know. And so I think that your point is well taken, and Z and I will connect and make sure that folks here are tracking and are aware of that. And we do the best we can to keep things under control. Anyone else
Great.
have questions for me?
I did see one question in the chat. Maybe you can address it there. Courtney asked about vaccines and its impact on the spread of COVID.
Okay,
So,
I'll be happy to answer that in the chat.
Okay, perfect. And Isaiah, what do you have to share with us today?
Yeah, I don't have as much as Jenny because Jenny's so amazing. But the Environmental Health Division officially deactivated due to our cold weather incident on December 30th. And I have some rough data about that if folks are interested in that. Yeah, so there's a lot of information on here. I won't go through all of it because not all of it is super useful. But in total, from I believe the 9th to the 23rd, there were 64 cold-related ED visits. Most of them were men, and about 40% of them were experiencing homelessness, or at least identified as experiencing homelessness. Obviously, that might not be an accurate representation, but that's what was tracked in essence. So that means about 26 of them were experiencing homelessness, were the ones that entered ED visits from that time period. There were 7 related to CO poisoning, which I know was a big concern for folks, especially with heating. I know that was a big concern for a lot of shelters and a lot of, like, for example, like Fob Hope, there was problems with people not being able to use certain types of heating because of CO poisoning, but there were only 7, which is not great, obviously, but that's, harm reduction wise, at least that's an improvement. So there's a lot more pieces of information here. There were 4 related to tent fires, and again, 75% of those were male. And then 2 required hospitalization. And then there were no hospitalizations due to CO poisonings. So only ED visits, no CO poisonings. So I know that's some rough data that we have. That was only for a few weeks. So we didn't get the very last week of 2022. So from the 23rd through to the 30th, we don't have any data, at least not that I have seen. But I might reach out to my APD folks and see if we have any information about that. So I'm not sure if have folks any questions about that data.
Yeah, I think there will be some questions about it, and it will be critical to get that data for the last week, because the ice storm happened right around that period as well.
Right, it was the 22nd or 23rd, I believe, right? Which is right when they stopped tracking. Yeah, so the weekend wasn't nice.
So I do see a couple of questions. I see your hand, Tammy. I think Paula had her hand up first, and then we'll get to you. Go ahead, Paula.
I just had a question for Isaiah on the counts of the hospitals. Was that all of Pierce County or just Tacoma? Okay. And then, okay. The other thing is that in East Pierce County, since we have less resources available and less shelters and all of that type of thing, we'd be very interested to find out how many were attributed to the hospital in our area, Good Sam. So if you could maybe extrapolate that data and send it out. I think folks in different areas would like to see that. Thank you.
Yeah, I can definitely ask. I mean, I know we have our GIS system, our Geographic Information System, and I'm not sure if they interlace that with Essence and tracking ED visits. I'll be honest with you, I am not a huge numbers person. I always refer back to the epidemiologists at our team and say, hey, can you please help me? But I can definitely ask and see if we can get that information out to you.
Great. And then Tammy had a question.
More of a comment. I just want to be clear that none of those CO2 issues at the ED were from FOBO.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that. No, I was just saying that as an example. I didn't mean to say that that was your site.
Yeah, no. We've had none.
Yep. Thanks for clarifying, Tammy.
Yep.
All right. And yeah, we do need to pull together a summary of the impact, the human impact of the cold spell that wrapped up at the end of December, and count for any folks who died while homeless during that time from exposure, if we're able to get that information. So more to come on that effort. Speaking of which, I don't know if we have anybody from the Department of Emergency Management with the county, but let's pause for a moment and see if we do before we move on to our final items on the agenda. All right, I didn't think I saw anybody here. So I'm going to very quickly breeze through some advocacy updates, and I do invite, I don't know if Sally's still here. Yes, Sally is still here. To add to this, but I did take a look through the Tacoma City Council agenda. There are no items on study session related to housing and homelessness. However, I did want to call out that on Tuesday night, the regular Tuesday meeting is a community forum. So there is an opportunity at that meeting to stand in front of City Council and share stories from the streets of the impact of the sweeps that are being done. So that is an opportunity I wanted to call out. Before I go further, I see your hand up, Courtney.
Yes, I should have asked earlier when Caleb did the presentation, but does Caleb have an update on when the 3-month review of the camping ban will be?
Yeah, do you have an update on that, Caleb? Anything you can share?
I do not. Courtney, I can follow up with you on that. Yeah, I'll have to touch base with Heel on that one.
Thank you, Caleb.
All right. The last item that I'll call out from the city of Tacoma is that the City Council's Community Vitality and Safety Committee meets on Thursday afternoon at 4:30. Again, nothing directly related to homelessness on their agenda, but they are going to talk about the funding recommendations for nonprofits in the city with general fund dollars. So it's always good to track that. As always, the agendas for the Pierce County Council will post later today. So if there's anything of interest there, it can be shared over email. And I did want to take an opportunity to remind folks that the Washington State Legislative Session convenes and opens on January 9th, on Monday. I will share to the coalition mailing list the invite to the first of what will be a series of weekly meetings on Friday afternoons with the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. The Housing Alliance will be, as previously shared, our priorities for this legislative session. And let's see, I will paste that link in the chat. But wanted to let folks know that those meetings will take place every Friday afternoon from 2 to 3 on Zoom. And there will be an opportunity from 3 to 3:30 to just do some community building after that and address some of the stresses that are definitely going to be present as we go through this long legislative session. Also, I wanted to share in case folks didn't see it, during the time that we were not doing regular meetings, Governor Inslee put out his budget request to the state legislature. I pasted in the chat a link to a blog post for the Housing Alliance's response and encouragement for the governor to invest more dollars in housing and homelessness in the coming biennium. And I do see your hand, Josh, so I'll get right to you. But one last thing I wanted to mention is this afternoon is the monthly meeting of the advisory board for the Pierce County Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness. If you have the capacity to join that meeting, it is taking place at 1 o'clock. Or actually, let me look at my calendar. It's taking place at, from 1 to 3 on Zoom. The link is to the meeting is on the Pierce County Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness page, which I will now put in the chat. And if you have the capacity to join that meeting this afternoon, it should be an interesting conversation. One of the things that will be talked about is the consultant's final report that will go to the county council regarding the creation of a unified regional approach to homelessness across Pierce County. And that will be interesting to hear. That report includes some recommendations at the end of what the consultant thinks would be most effective. And that report will not go to the county council until February, but it's going to be unveiled today at this advisory board meeting. So that's a lot of blah, 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 but hopefully some of those links are useful. And I do want to, as the legislative session moves forward, give a lot of opportunities for those who attend these meetings to make their voices heard in Olympia. All that being said, Josh, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Rob. There's a number of things to share, just updates on some of our projects, but I'll just keep it short and I can share maybe a longer report next time. But I wanted to share something because it's very relevant to what we were talking about today, that we are in February, we are purchasing Candlewood Suites. It's 93 units in Lakewood. And it's going to be enhanced shelter for singles, couples, and people with pets. And the plan is to convert it into permanent supportive housing later. It's funded through the state's right-of-way program. A lot of the projects we're setting up right now are actually funded through that program. And we have just decided to name Candlewood Suites Maureen Howard Place. So just wanted to make sure that was known. We are just grateful. I've worked with her for a long time, and so is Sharon Lee. And just grateful for all of her work and her advocacy on homelessness and housing. And yeah, we're just it's just the right thing to do. Yeah, and we have a number through the ROH program. We are right now we're trying to get people, because of the cold weather and everything, we're trying to get people moved right now temporarily into hotel rooms, and then we're going to fill the we have like 15 hotel rooms filled right now. Through the right-of-way program, and then 5 more expected soon. And then we're going to transition these folks once Maureen Howard Place opens. We're going to transition these folks into that building, and that's going to be in next month. So that's coming up. But I'll share a fuller report next week. I just wanted to make sure that was known.
Thank you, Josh. All right. So let's see. We are rapidly running out of time for today's meeting, but we do have a couple of items still on our agenda. Jan, anything you want to share from the Safe Sites for All committee?
Safe Sites for All pretty much turned into the inclement weather response action team. So I'm going to give a brief update, and Jay is here too. One of the success stories of this particular coalition is the fact that we see each other face to face, to include all providers from government, or at least they're invited to come here to the open table here. So DEM, Department of Emergency Management for Pierce County, invited 2 representatives from this coalition to be at the table during inclement weather at their Emergency Operations Center. So December 19th through the 23rd, Jay Worley and I were invited and encouraged to come in for an 8 a.m. Zoom meeting with not only DEM, but with their hosting of all municipalities and jurisdiction fire and emergency response teams, and anybody else, not the politicians didn't come, but the first responders, law enforcement, fire teams. So anybody responding to 911, they saw us as coalition members there. They heard our concerns. We talked to them. We got names and emails, and we were invited there for every day of the 19th to the 23rd for that 8 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. meeting. Then at 8:30, Pierce County Human Services had a meeting for everybody in the coalition to talk about who is where, doing what, who needs what. So we were able to do some connection between resources and the actual, those of you who are on the street, who needs what where. By the end of that week, DEM came up with about a dozen and a half warm kit, hygiene kits, what they called hygiene kits, which was low temp sleeping bags, plus heat warmers, plus signs and symptoms of frostbite and exposure. So it is beyond what DEM typically does, because there was not a declaration of Pierce County responding to inclement weather, but it recognized there was bad weather, invited us in, we were at the table. So even though the response wasn't enough to stop the folks from showing up in Isaiah's report as far as ED visits or loss of limb function or organ function, at least we think we really made an impact, and we're trying to support outreach teams. So that's that. Goodbye. Have a healthy week.
Thank you, Jan. Jay.
The other side of that is that we got a lot more connectivity between our services and ourselves. We're starting to get more people on board from our actual service providers like firemen and police and otherwise. So the amount of work that we put in with DEM and our community is really, it's almost staggering in the way that it has proceeded to create the network that we have now. We have over 100 people on our inclement weather thread / listserv. Hopefully everybody works on getting to the listserv, please. And that network of people is our core people that work with our community. That is more than just our contracted outreach. This is all of our volunteer outreach. And that is a huge success for a group like ours in our community, building a network throughout all of Pierce County for the hardest times when we need it the most. And so everyone, thank you so much for working with us and doing the groundwork and the outreach that we have, and all of the other people that are in budgeting and in grant work that are willing to sit down and discuss what needs to be done so that our next inclement weather cycle is even better and we can prevent more damage done to our community. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Jay and Jan and everyone who worked on doing outreach during the cold weather, and fingers are crossed that we don't see a return of the cold weather, but we still have a few weeks ahead of us of that potential. So any coalition committee updates we need to discuss today? Yeah, I don't think there was anything critical today. So we have a little bit of time for some combined good trouble announcements / success stories. Anybody have anything they'd like to share with the 50 of us who are still here? Yeah, Teresa.
I know I've been talking a lot today, but there was this pause. So I want to talk about 99 Stockings. That was a real success. This year, and the people who are clapping, a lot of them had a lot to do with why it was a success. I just want to thank the coalition in general for the support that you all provided for this, and all the many people who did something to make this work, including Christine, who allowed us to use her garage to house all the 99 stocking product, which was quite a bit. And last year we put out about 400 stockings and bags for both at the shelters and directly in outreach to people experiencing homelessness in the street. And this year we put out more than 500. So that is a little bit of a miracle. I keep being amazed that they go out, and we had help from the Boy Scouts this year, which was great. We had more community members than ever engaged in it. And next year we already have some people interested in helping who weren't helping this year. So to you, I say, my hat goes off to you. And also, if you know of an organization or individuals who would like to be part of this, it's kind of life-giving in the midst of a lot of chaos and a lot of things that don't go really well. this is something that tends to go pretty smoothly and gives people a smile. So be in touch. I'm going to put my email address in the chat. We would particularly love to have a partnership with some organization or church that has a space where these things could be gathered during the year so that we don't have to gather them all so quickly. So keep that in mind, and please be in touch if you have, even if you don't want to be identified as the person who recommended a church or something to me, just let me know and I will cold call them. But I would very much like to have such a partnership. So if you or somebody you know is engaged in a group that might consider that, be in touch. And thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. And Isaiah, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we still have lots of clothing donations at the health departments, and we have many cold weather injury cards, and I'm going to see if Greater Lakes wants those today. But even once they take some, we will still have a few, I believe at least 200 to 300, and I can get a better representation of what we have in terms of clothing when I stop by the office today. But I know we have some coats and neck warmers and things like that. So if anyone wants anything, I know it's warmed up quite significantly, but we don't know how long that will last. So if you want anything, please let me know and I can connect with you and find a way to get those things.
Thank you. And Jay, I see your hand up.
I did put the link into the data sheets earlier. Christine has been wonderful in working on making those much more usable. Please do use the need and share though. That way, Isaiah, you can look on there who needs things and other people can get the information from Isaiah of what he has available. There is updated information throughout all of that. The last page is mostly for DEM though. That is just a keep track of what we have been going through, what we have used and everything else. So it's kind of a in process, all the time changing set there. So everything should go into needs and or share at the front. And if it's just like a distribution, like you just dropped it off at a site, go ahead and in need or share, put distributed to and either LEC or St. Vincent de Paul, an abbreviation, or New Hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay, and thanks for the work that everyone's doing to continue to gather items and try to organize that response effort. So we have come to the end of our time. I appreciate everyone being here today. Still 47 of us who hung in for the full call. I know this is kind of a tough emotional day, so I appreciate everyone. I know Maureen would appreciate our ongoing effort, and I wish all of you a happy and safe weekend, and I look forward to seeing everybody again next Friday. If you have the ability and the interest, we will convene here in the same room here in a few minutes to plan upcoming meetings. But for those who need to go, have a good week. See you next Friday.